Michael's footsteps echoed through the urban canyons, a symphony of solitude in the heart of the city. The sky was a canvas of fading light, the day's warmth retreating as the chill of evening set in. His breath formed the fog, a fleeting dance of condensation before it dissipated into the air. He was a man of simple means, his life a tapestry of muted colors, each thread representing a dream deferred or a hope unrealized. He walked with a sense of urgency, not from any particular destination, but from the weight of his circumstances. His job as a night shift stock clerk at a corner grocery store barely kept the wolf from the door. The meager paycheck, once a lifeline, now felt like a noose, tightening around his future. As he turned onto his street, the glow of the streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows that seemed to mimic his own. There, beneath the flickering amber light, sat an old man, his frame hunched against the cold. He was a figure etched in contrasts, ragged clothes against the city's grandeur, ancient eyes against a young man's despair. Michael's initial reaction was to look away, to continue his journey uninterrupted. But something in the old man's gaze, a depth of understanding perhaps, or a reflection of his own weariness, rooted him to the spot. The old man's eyes were a clear blue, windows to a soul that had seen more sunrises and sunsets than Michael could fathom.
"Sir,"
Michael said, his voice softer than the city's drone.
"do you need help?"
He approached cautiously, his hand already reaching for his wallet, though he knew it held little more than a few crumpled bills. The old man looked up, his eyes meeting Michael's with an intensity that was both startling and comforting.
"Help?"
He echoed, his voice a raspy whisper, as if from disuse or the chill of the night.
"I've been given much, young man, and I have much to give in return."
He gestured to the empty space beside him, an invitation to sit. Michael hesitated, his social conditioning warring with a strange compulsion to engage with this stranger. Curiosity won out, and he lowered himself onto the cold concrete, his back resting against the unyielding brick wall.
"I've been watching you, Michael,"
the old man said, his voice carrying a weight that suggested he knew more than he should.
"I see a man at a crossroads, a man in need of a miracle."
Michael's brow furrowed.
"Miracles are for the faithful, and I—"
He trailed off, the admission of his lack of faith hanging in the air. The old man chuckled, a sound that was surprisingly warm and full.
"Miracles are for those who believe in them, and sometimes they come in the most unexpected forms."
He reached into his coat, producing a small, worn leather pouch.
"I can grant you 3 wishes, Michael. 3 wishes, and they will be yours."
Michael's lips twitched into a half-smile.
"You must be freezing out here.
He said, evading the offer.
Let me buy you a cup of coffee."
But the old man shook his head, his eyes gleaming with a mischievous light.
"The first wish,
He repeated.
and it may change your life."
Michael considered the offer, the weight of his circumstances pressing down on him.
"I wish for enough money to pay my rent this month,"
He said, half joking, half hopeful. The old man nodded, a smile playing on his lips.
"It is done,"
He said, and with a suddenness that caught Michael off guard, he stood and walked away, disappearing into the sea of faces and the city's relentless rhythm. Michael watched him go, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and disbelief. He continued to his apartment, the encounter with the old man lingering in his thoughts like an unfinished melody. The next morning, as the first light of dawn crept through his window, Michael found an envelope slipped under his door. His hands trembled as he opened it, revealing a check made out to him for the exact amount he needed to cover his rent. He stared at it, his mind racing back to the old man's words, the promise of a wish granted. For the first time in a long time, Michael felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't sure how or why, but he knew his life had taken an unexpected turn, and he was both terrified and exhilarated by the possibilities that lay ahead. The check on Michael's kitchen table was a tangible miracle, a piece of paper that held the weight of his immediate future. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface, the raised printing of the bank's logo, the crisp edges that hinted at new beginnings. The night before, he had gone to bed with a lingering doubt, a skepticism that the old man's promise was nothing more than a figment of his imagination, a desperate wish for a change in his circumstances. But now, in the harsh light of morning, the check was real as the coffee brewing in the corner and the city waking up outside his window. Michael's mind raced with questions. How had the old man known his name? How had he known the exact amount of his rent? And most importantly, why had he chosen Michael? With the check in hand, Michael felt a surge of relief, but it was quickly followed by a sense of unease. He had wished for money, and he had received it, but at what cost? The old man had disappeared into the night, leaving Michael with more questions than answers. Determined to find some clarity, Michael decided to spend the day searching for the old man. He retraced his steps from the previous night, visiting every corner where they had crossed paths, asking every passerby if they had seen the old man. But the city, with its millions of souls, had swallowed the stranger whole, leaving no trace behind. As the day wore on, Michael found himself wandering through the city's less traveled paths, drawn to the quiet corners where the old man might have sought refuge. He passed by the rows of brownstones, their windows like watchful eyes, and the alleyways that whispered with secrets. He walked through the city's parks, where the laughter of children and the rustle of leaves seemed to echo the old man's enigmatic presence. In the late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the pavement, Michael found himself in front of a small, independent bookstore. The shop's window was filled with colorful posters of upcoming author events and children's story hours. The warm glow of the interior lights beckoned him, a promise of sanctuary from the cold. He pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly, and was greeted by the scent of old books and the faint hum of classical music. The bookstore was a labyrinth of shelves, each one a gateway to a different world, a different life. Michael wandered through the aisles, his fingers tracing the spines of books that held the collective wisdom of humanity. In the back corner of the store, he found a small cafe, where a group of people were gathered around a table, their faces illuminated by the soft light of a single lamp. They were discussing a book, their voices animated, their laughter infectious. Michael watched them from a distance, a pang of longing piercing through him. He had always been a solitary figure, his life a series of missed connections and unspoken words. Feeling a sudden kinship with the old man, Michael decided to buy the book they were discussing. He approached the counter, where a young woman with a kind smile was ringing up a customer's purchase.
"Excuse me,"
he said, his voice barely above a whisper.
"Could you tell me the title of the book those people are discussing?"
The woman looked over her shoulder and smiled.
"Oh, that's The Time Traveler's Wife. It's a beautiful story about love and time. Would you like a copy?"
Michael nodded, his hands fumbling with his wallet as he paid for the book. He left the bookstore with the novel tucked under his arm, a small smile playing on his lips. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of connection, a sense of belonging. As he walked home, the city lights flickering to life around him, Michael felt a strange sense of peace. The old man had given him more than just a check. He had given him a glimpse of a different life, a life filled with stories and shared experiences. Michael made a silent promise to himself. He would find the old man, he would understand the magic, but for now, he would focus on the magic he could see, the magic of stories and the people who shared them. The check still lay on his kitchen table, a tangible reminder of the possibilities that lay ahead. Michael was no longer just a man struggling to make ends meet. He was a man with a purpose, a man with a choice. And as he closed his eyes that night, he made a silent promise to himself, to choose wisely, to live fully, and to leave a mark on the world that was brighter than any wish could make. With the weight of his financial worries temporarily lifted, Michael found himself at a crossroads. The check had given him more than just relief from his immediate troubles, it had opened a door to the possibility of change. As he pondered his second wish, he walked through the city, letting its rhythm guide his steps and its sounds fill his thoughts. The sun was a golden orb in the sky, casting a warm light that seemed to chase away the shadows of the previous night. Michael meandered through the park, where the scent of blooming flowers mixed with the fresh-cut grass. Children played on the swings and slides, their laughter a melody that echoed the joy of life. As he walked along the winding path, he noticed a young girl sitting alone on a bench, her eyes fixed on a picture book in her lap. Her golden curls framed a face that seemed troubled, her small brow furrowed in concentration. Michael approached, drawn by the sight of her solitary figure amidst the bustling park.
Hello there.
He said gently, not wanting to startle her.
What are you reading?
The girl looked up, her blue eyes wide with surprise.
It's a story about a princess who gets lost in a forest.
She replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael sat down next to her, his gaze falling on the colorful illustrations.
That sounds like quite an adventure. Do you like stories about adventures?
The girl nodded vigorously, a small smile playing on her lips.
I like to imagine I'm the princess, and I can find my way home.
Michael's heart ached at her words. He, too, had felt lost, had felt the need to find his way home in a world that often seemed like a maze.
I think we all feel that way sometimes.
He said softly. As they talked, Michael learned that the girl's name was Lily, and she was waiting for her mother to pick her up after school. But as the minutes turned into hours, it became clear that Lily's mother was late, and the park began to empty. Concerned, Michael offered to stay with her until her mother arrived. They talked about books and adventures, about dreams and fears. Lily's innocence and openness touched Michael, reminding him of a time when life was simpler, when the world was full of possibilities. As the sun began to set, casting the park in a warm, golden glow, a frantic woman rushed towards them. Her eyes were wild with worry, her breath coming in short gasps.
Lily!
She cried, relief flooding her face as she saw her daughter safe and sound. Lily leaped into her mother's arms, hugging her tightly.
Mommy, I was waiting for you.
She said, her voice muffled by her mother's coat. The woman, Sarah, turned to Michael, her eyes brimming with tears.
Thank you.
She said, her voice choked with emotion.
I got stuck at work, and I couldn't get a message to her. I can't thank you enough for staying with her.
Michael shook his head, a warmth spreading through him.
It was my pleasure.
He replied.
Lily and I had a great time talking about stories.
As they walked away, Sarah holding Lily's hand, Michael felt a strange sense of longing. He had never been a father, never had a family of his own. But in that moment, he felt a deep yearning for the kind of connection he had just witnessed. That night, as Michael lay in bed, he made his second wish.
I wish for a family like Lily's.
He whispered into the darkness.
A family to love and to be loved by.
In the days that followed, Michael found himself thinking about Sarah and Lily. He visited the park again, hoping to see them, to share another story with Lily. And when he did, it was as if a bond had been formed, a connection that grew stronger with each meeting. Sarah, a single mother struggling to balance work and family, found solace in Michael's company. He offered to help, to be there for Lily when she needed someone. And slowly, they became a family, a unit bound not by blood but by love and mutual support. Michael's wish had come true in a way he had never expected. He had found a family, a place where he belonged, and a love that filled the empty spaces in his heart. And as they sat together on the park bench, sharing stories and laughter, Michael knew that this was the warmth, the comfort he had been seeking all along. Michael's life had taken a turn he could never have anticipated. With the fulfillment of his second wish, he found himself at the center of a new family, a warmth that had been missing from his life. But as the days passed, the memory of the old man's words echoed in his mind, a reminder that he still had one wish left to claim. It was a cool autumn evening when Michael decided to make his third and final wish. The city was alive with the sounds of nightlife, the streets glowing with neon lights that cast long, dancing shadows. Michael stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking out over the sea of lights, the city's heartbeat pulsing beneath him. In the quiet of the night, with only the distant hum of traffic and the whisper of the wind for company, Michael made his choice.
I wish for power and influence.
He whispered, his voice carrying into the night. He wanted to shape the city, to leave a mark that would outlast him, to be someone who couldn't be ignored or pushed aside. The change was almost immediate. Opportunities presented themselves, doors opened that had been previously closed. Michael found himself in meetings with the city's elite, his opinions sought after, his presence demanded. His influence grew, and with it, his wealth. He became a player in the game of power, a man who could make or break with a single word. But as Michael's power grew, so did the distance between him and those he loved. Sarah noticed the change first, a coolness in his demeanor, a detachment that hadn't been there before. She tried to reach him, to remind him of the man he had been, but Michael was caught in the current of his own ambition. Lily, too, felt the loss. The man who had once listened to her stories with such interest was now a stranger, his mind always elsewhere, his heart closed off. She missed the adventures they had shared, the laughter that had filled their days. Michael's rise to power was meteoric, but it came at a cost. His relationships withered, his soul felt heavy with the weight of his choices. The city that had once been a place of promise now felt like a cage, its glittering lights a mockery of the life he had lost. One evening, as Michael sat alone in his office, the city spread out below him like a map of his conquests. The old man appeared. His presence was as unexpected as it was unwelcome.
You've become a stranger to yourself, Michael.
The old man said, his voice heavy with disapproval.
Power is a fickle master, and you've let it rule you.
Michael looked up, his eyes reflecting the city's lights.
I've achieved what I wished for.
He replied, his voice defensive. The old man shook his head, his eyes filled with sadness.
You've lost more than you've gained.
He said.
You've lost your humanity, your connection to those who loved you.
His words hung in the air, a challenge to Michael's choices. As the old man disappeared into the night, Michael was left alone with his thoughts, the silence of his office a stark contrast to the bustling city outside. In the days that followed, Michael found himself questioning his decisions. He saw the emptiness of his life, the isolation that came with his power. He missed Sarah's laughter, Lily's stories. He missed the warmth of a family that had become his own. It was a hard realization, a bitter pill to swallow. Michael had reached the pinnacle of power only to find that it was a cold and lonely place. He had wished for influence, for control, but in doing so, he had lost the one thing that made life worth living, love. As the city slept, Michael made a decision. He would use his power to do good, to make amends for the damage he had done. He would rebuild the bridges he had burned, heal the relationships he had broken. It was a long road to redemption, a journey that would test him in ways he had never imagined. But as Michael stepped out into the city, determined to right his wrongs, he knew that it was a journey worth taking. For in the end, it wasn't power or wealth that defined a man, but the choices he made and the love he carried in his heart. The realization of his mistakes weighed heavily on Michael as he stood on the precipice of change. The city, once a symbol of his ambitions, now served as a reminder of the path he needed to take to redemption. The sun was rising, casting a hopeful light over the urban landscape, as if signaling a new beginning. Michael's first step was to reach out to Sarah and Lily. He knew that rebuilding their trust would not be easy, but he was determined to try. He wrote a letter, pouring his heart into words, expressing his regret and his desire to be a part of their lives again. He left the letter with a bouquet of flowers on Sarah's doorstep, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Days passed with no response, and Michael's anxiety grew. He knew he had to do more. He began by visiting the community center where he had first connected with Sarah and Lily. The center was in disrepair, a victim of budget cuts and neglect. Michael saw an opportunity to make a tangible difference. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, cleaning, painting, and organizing. He reached out to local businesses for donations and to volunteers for help. Slowly, the center began to transform. Word spread of Michael's efforts, and more people joined in, their numbers swelling with each passing day. One afternoon, as Michael was painting the walls of the community center's library, he heard a small voice behind him.
You're doing a good thing here.
Lily said, her eyes wide as she took in the freshly painted room. Michael turned, his brush paused mid-stroke.
Lily,
He said, his voice catching in his throat.
I'm glad you're here.
She looked up at him, her expression serious.
Why did you leave us?
Michael set down his brush and crouched down to her level.
I made a mistake, Lily. I got lost in wanting things that didn't matter. But I'm trying to make it right.
Lily considered this, then nodded.
Okay. But next time, talk to us, okay?
I promise.
Michael said, his heart swelling with gratitude for her understanding. As the community center came back to life, so did Michael's connection with Sarah. She watched his efforts, her skepticism slowly giving way to respect. They began to talk again, their conversations tentative at first, but gradually becoming more frequent and open. One evening, as they sat together in the newly revitalized garden of the community center, Sarah turned to Michael.
I see the change in you.
She said softly.
You've worked hard to make amends.
Michael looked into her eyes, his heart filled with a warmth he had almost forgotten.
I have a lot to make up for.
He replied.
But I want to be here, for you and for Lily.
Sarah reached for his hand, her touch sending a shiver of hope through him.
We'd like that.
She said, a smile playing on her lips. As the seasons changed, so did Michael's life. The community center became a hub of activity, a place where people came together to learn, to grow, and to support one another. Michael's reputation shifted from that of a power-hungry businessman to a man who had found his purpose in serving others. He continued to work on the community center, but he also found time to spend with Sarah and Lily. They went on picnics, visited museums, and simply enjoyed each other's company. Michael became the father figure Lily had always needed, and Sarah found in him a partner who was present and committed. The city, once a stage for Michael's ambitions, now witnessed his transformation. He had found his path to redemption, not in the pursuit of power, but in the simple acts of kindness and the bonds of a family that had chosen him. As Michael stood in the community center, looking out at the people who had become his community, he knew that this was the wealth he had been seeking all along. It wasn't in the buildings or the accolades of the powerful, it was in the love and respect of those around him, in the knowledge that he had made a difference, and in the family that had welcomed him with open arms. Michael stood at the entrance of the community center, its freshly painted sign gleaming in the morning sun. The day of the grand reopening had arrived, and with it, a sense of pride and accomplishment that he had never felt in the boardrooms or at the peak of his power. The center was more than just a building, it was a symbol of the community's resilience and a testament to the power of second chances. As the doors opened, a stream of familiar faces filed in, their expressions a mix of awe and delight. The once dilapidated center had been transformed into a vibrant space filled with life and color. The library, now stocked with donated books, was a cozy nook where children and adults alike could lose themselves in the pages of a good story. The walls, adorned with local artwork, told stories of the city's culture and history. Sarah and Lily were by Michael's side, their presence a constant reminder of the family he had found and the love that had blossomed amidst his journey of redemption. Lily, now a regular at the center's after-school program, clutched a small drawing in her hands, a gift for the community that had embraced her and her mother. The ceremony began with a speech from the mayor, who commended Michael for his dedication to the community.
This center is more than just a place, it's a beacon of hope.
The mayor said, his words echoing through the room. Michael shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the spotlight but grateful for the recognition. As the speeches came to an end, Michael approached the podium. His hands were clammy, his heart pounding in his chest. This was his moment to speak from the heart, to share the journey that had led him here.
A year ago, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, a man with everything and nothing at the same time.
He began, his voice steady.
I had power, but I had lost my way. I had influence, but I was alone.
He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, seeing not just the people of the community but the friends he had made along the way.
Then I met the old man.
He continued, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as he remembered their encounters.
He granted me 3 wishes, and in a way, he granted me a chance to change my life.
He spoke of his initial greed, the loss of his family, and the path of redemption he had walked since then.
The true wealth in life is not in the size of your bank account or the number of people who know your name.
He said, his voice growing stronger.
It's in the connections you make, the love you share, and the difference you make in the lives of others.
He looked down at Lily, who was beaming up at him, and then at Sarah, whose eyes were filled with pride.
I found my true wealth here, in this community, with the people who have shown me what it means to belong, to love, and to be loved.
His speech ended to a round of applause, the sound filling the center and echoing in his heart. As the day progressed, the center buzzed with activity. Children played in the newly built playground, while adults attended workshops on various topics, from financial literacy to art appreciation. The community center had become a hub of learning, growth, and togetherness. In the evening, as the last guests left and the center grew quiet, Michael stood with Sarah and Lily, looking around at the space that had become so much more than a building.
What do you think?
He asked, his voice filled with hope. Sarah smiled, her hand finding his.
I think you've created something special.
She said.
Something that will last long after we're gone.
Lily nodded, her eyes shining.
I'm glad you're my family.
She said, her voice soft but full of meaning. Michael's heart swelled with love and gratitude. He had traveled a long road, made mistakes, and faced his demons. But in the end, he had found his true wealth, not in the fleeting glitz of power, but in the enduring warmth of a family and a community that had embraced him. As they walked out of the center, hand in hand, Michael knew that this was the legacy he wanted to leave behind, a place where everyone felt welcome, where everyone had a chance to grow, and where everyone could find their true wealth. The city, with its endless possibilities, had finally become his home, and he was ready to write the next chapter of his life within its bustling streets.